Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to be looking at what is arguably one of the most unforgiving environments on planet Earth, the underwater cave. We're going to examine the terrifying realities of cave diving, specifically zoning in on the fatal tragedies at notorious spots like Eagle's Nest down in Florida and the Shaft over in Australia. We'll break down the data, the environmental hazards, and, well, the very real human cost of venturing into the abyss without the right prep. There's this haunting quote that gets passed around among cave divers. The cave does not care what you look like on the surface, it only cares what you know in the dark. It's chilling, right? In these extreme environments, superficial appearances mean absolutely nothing. Nature is just completely indifferent. So as we walk through these events today, I want you to keep this quote in the back of your mind. It perfectly captures that fatal line between merely looking the part and actually possessing the vital knowledge you need to survive when things go terribly wrong. And this brilliantly illustrates that deception. Eagle's Nest, which is tucked away in a remote pine forest in west central Florida, is a perfect example. I mean, to a casual observer, it just looks like an ordinary, peaceful green pond. You'd probably never look twice. But directly beneath that placid water, there's a terrifying 300-foot deep labyrinth of dark tunnels and chambers hidden completely out of sight. It's literally a massive, complex maze buried right into the earth. Because of that extreme depth and insane complexity, divers have given Eagle's Nest a pretty chilling nickname, the Mount Everest of cave diving. Seriously, only the most highly trained and certified cave divers should ever even think about entering it. It is so dangerous that there's actually an ominous sign featuring the Grim Reaper sitting right at the entrance. It explicitly warns unauthorized divers to turn back so they can live. And the numbers back it up. Since 1981, at least 10 people have died inside the specific cave. It really proves just how deadly this Mount Everest truly is.
So, the crucial point is understanding how on earth divers survive down there. And it all boils down to the absolute most fundamental law in cave diving, the rule of thirds. This rule dictates that a diver must rigidly manage their air supply. It works like this. You use exactly 1/3 of your air going into the cave. You save another third for your journey out. And that final 1/3, that is kept strictly for emergencies, no exceptions. If you don't know this rule, you honestly have zero business being inside a cave.
Tragically, ignoring that exact rule cost 2 lives on Christmas Day back in 2013. 35-year-old Darren Spivey and his 15-year-old son Dylan were gearing up at the water's edge. Now, to anyone watching, they definitely looked the part. A fellow diver even noted they were rocking double tanks, 7-foot hoses, canister lights, the whole shebang. But here is the fatal flaw. They were not certified cave divers. They descended into Eagle's Nest without knowing the rule of thirds. They almost certainly went too deep, stayed way too long, and just burned right through their air supply. With nowhere to surface and no air pocket above them, they literally ran out of air. Neither the father nor the son made it out. Let's move to environmental hazards and see how this builds. Because what if you are certified? You still face terrifying, completely unpredictable conditions, chief among them the dreaded silt-out. It happens in the blink of an eye. Say a diver's fins or scooters just slightly disturb the fine sediment on the cave floor. Those tiny particles suddenly explode into the water like thick smoke, and visibility drops to absolute zero in mere seconds. Literally seconds. One moment you're looking down a crystal clear tunnel, and the next you literally cannot see your own hand in front of your face. This brings us to June of 2003. 2 friends, John Robinson, who actually had been certified for over 10 years, and Craig Simon, descended into Eagle's Nest. Now, these guys were professionals. They had the right equipment, double tanks loaded with a special helium air mixture to fend off nitrogen narcosis, and scooters to move quickly through the system. But over 1,000 feet deep inside the cave, disaster struck. A massive silt-out hit them out of nowhere, completely blinding them in the pitch-black abyss. When a silt-out happens, a diver has to rely entirely on what's called a guideline. Basically, this is a continuous rope that connects a diver all the way back to the exit, and it serves as their sole lifeline when visibility completely fails. In that blinding silt, John lost his grip on this line. He dropped his scooter and frantically searched for the rope in total darkness. He did eventually find a line, but in all the chaos, he made a fatal error. He followed it in the wrong direction. Every single kick took him further away from safety, deeper into the cave, until his air finally ran dry. Craig was found nearby, tangled in a line, having suffered the exact same fate. The logistics of their recovery really paint a grim picture of just how massive this cave is. As you can see, John and Craig were located roughly 1,100 feet from the entrance, sitting at an extreme depth of around 200 feet. It took rescue teams until Monday just to extract them. They actually had to use a complex system of relaying nitrogen bottles to the recovery divers just to keep them in the water long enough to retrieve the bodies. It just highlights the immense, almost unthinkable logistical nightmare of deep water recovery. Let's shift our focus across the world for a second to Mount Gambier in South Australia, to a notorious sinkhole known as the Shaft. This place had this tiny 1-meter wide surface opening that just dropped straight down into massive, crystal clear underground chambers. It was a breathtaking sight for sure. On May 28, 1973, a group of 8 divers showed up. 4 of them claimed to be instructors, but crucially, not a single one was a trained cave diver. And they made the ultimate mistake. They entered this massive cave system without running a guideline. Deep inside, they lost track of time and, you guessed it, burned through their air. When panic finally set in, Christine Millett and Gordon Roberts tried to swim upwards toward what they thought was the exit. But instead, they swam straight up into a dome in the ceiling. It was just a dead end of solid rock with absolutely no way out. The surviving divers below could only watch a scene of pure psychological horror. Christine and Gordon's torches were just flickering up in the dome above, frantically searching, and then going completely still as they ran out of air and drowned. 2 others, Stephen and John, also became lost in the silty water without a line and met the same tragic end.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the historical impact of that day. 4 deaths in a single incident deeply shocked Australia. Like, it sent shockwaves through the entire community, and it led directly to the creation of the Cave Divers Association of Australia later that very same year. They drew a hard line. Proper training was strictly enforced, using a guideline became absolutely mandatory, and rigid air management rules were firmly put in place. Basically, tragedy directly forced the regulation of the sport to ensure divers actually had the knowledge they needed to survive.
But that raises the question, what happens when you follow all the rules and you have world-class training? On October 15, 2016, we returned to Eagle's Nest. Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmere were absolutely not beginners. They were highly certified instructors. They had dived Eagle's Nest plenty of times and were out conducting a weekend exploration dive while a buddy waited for them up in a shallower section. But at 3 p.m., they never showed up at their meeting point. Deep inside, an unimaginable crisis was unfolding. Patrick had somehow become physically stuck in a terribly narrow section of the cave, a staggering 1,300 feet from the entrance. Think about that distance. He was forced to make a truly desperate decision just to break free. He removed all of his heavy diving equipment, his rebreather, his open-circuit scuba tanks, his buoyancy gear. He took it all off, leaving perfectly functional gear lying right there in the dirt. He was now completely free from the rock. But the catch? He had absolutely no air supply of his own.
Now, Chris, acting exactly as he was trained and honestly just true to his character, absolutely refused to leave his friend behind. Together, they engaged in a grueling test of endurance, 700 feet on a single tank. They started buddy breathing. Just picture sharing 1 tank of air between 2 guys swimming through a pitch-dark tunnel. 1 breath for Chris, 1 breath for Patrick. Over and over, kicking through the blackness, desperately racing against the rapidly depleting air in that 1 single tank.
And here is the truly heartbreaking conclusion to their fight. They were found 550 feet from the entrance. They had managed to swim over 700 feet back from where Patrick got stuck, and they died side by side. But the most devastating detail is what lay just ahead of them. A spare oxygen tank they had actually staged near the exit. They were mere moments away, literally just a short swim from survival, when the air finally ran out. It's a sobering proof that even the best in the world can fall victim to the cave. All of this leaves us with a profound question. Why do we continue to push our human limits in a space that is completely indifferent to our survival? Whether it's lacking the knowledge of the rule of thirds, the blinding terror of a sudden silt-out, or an unpredictable gear entrapment, the underwater cave remains a magnificent but deadly frontier. It's a testament to human curiosity for sure, but also a stark reminder of our extreme vulnerability. Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me.